Hello there, guys. So, what the purpose of this video and this lesson is to basically just go through different features of your graphing calculator. So, I'm 100% not going to be doing every single feature, and some of them you guys had the opportunity to go through a little bit yesterday when we focused on quadratics. So, this is kind of going to just be other things you can do with your graphing calculator. So as you can see, I have mine pulled up. This is the technology one, like the download that I sent you guys. There's a variety of different TI on here. So if I actually click right down here, I can go to the other ones. I'm going to do the TI 84 Plus because that's what I think a lot of you guys probably have. If you have a handheld one, use it. If you have a Chromebook, I also sent you the add-on, which is very easy to just add it to your Chrome, or very simple to just add it to your Chrome. But that will only work if you have a Chromebook. So hopefully you can have an opportunity to follow along with me, as these will be some nice tips and tricks as you're going through Algebra 2 and beyond. So that's what we're going to be doing. So this is the list that I came up with that I'm going to be showing you in this. There are other things that you can do with your graphing calculator, and I want you, when you're done with this, if there's one that you want to explore further, or if you're like, I wonder why I might want to use something like that, I do want you to take the time to do that, or play it. Like, when you know these things, maybe you see other things that that will pop up when I'm clicking, and for that reason, maybe you want to explore something further and then share your findings, and you'll have an opportunity to do that. So clearing your graphing calculator, returning to the home screen, inserting a character, copy your last entry and paste your last entry, copy and pasting entries, storing information, converting between decimals and fractions, just finding some items in the calculator that we often use. And then these are not as critical. They come up as you go farther into math, but they're kind of nice for me to share with you. But these first ones up here, like knowing them, it's going to help you a lot throughout this year. I feel a lot of times I find myself going over to students in my classroom, especially in like the Algebra 2 level when you're first exploring a graphing calculator, and showing it. And since I'm not going to have that opportunity during the school year, you're probably not going to receive that right away in the school year. So kind of exploring on your own will be helpful. So let's get started. So I have some screenshots in here. So clearing your calculator. Right? So you'll have a teacher that might ask you to do this before a test, that you can't store things in your calculator, right? And you can't store answers. So there's kind of two different procedures for this, and it depends if you're just going to clear the RAM or clear the entire memory, like clear everything or not. So I'm going to show it over here, and I also have it written on the left with screenshots. So if you push second plus 7, I don't even have to arrow down, 7, 1 will do like all RAM. Okay, so that's this pathway. And then 2 will reset it, and I'll see this screen. So what I will look for before a test and after a test, or for a quiz and after a quiz that involves a calculator, I will look for this screen to be popped up. The other thing is maybe you're cleaning your entire memory. Second plus 7, it starts the same. Instead of the RAM, you're going to go over to all, and it's all memory. And then arrow down to 2, enter, and it will clear the entire memory. So right, this is going to delete all data, whereas resetting the RAM erases all data and programs from the RAM. And this like will get rid of apps and other like things that you might have added on there, which you might not have too much of that yet. So where this also becomes useful to us is if your calculator is giving you issues and you can't quite figure out like what the issue is, but it might be, you're like, I'm fairly certain it's not user error. Go ahead and like clear your memory or clear your RAM and try it again, right? Like it kind of just resets your calculator. Okay, so that's clearing it. Returning to the home screen. I put this one on here because I feel like we tend to have some issues with this. So let's say you like click and you're like into something and you don't know what it is. And I'm gonna try to come up with an example. I don't know, sometimes like if you try to graph something just by pushing clear, it's not getting me out of it. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. I could turn the calculator off, which is second on. right? I would turn it off. Or I could just quit, and if I push second mode, it takes me back to the home screen. So if you ever get stuck somewhere and you're like pushing a bunch of things and your calculator won't clear, like you can't get out of it, push second mode and it will just take you to the home screen. Instead of, I feel like I run into a lot of students will just be like, yeah, I can't figure this out, I'm just going to clear the whole thing. This is just a way to do that where like you don't have to clear everything in your calculator. You don't have to turn your calculator off. You can just return to the home screen by pushing second mode. Okay, inserting a character. I really like this one. So let's say I put an equation in here. Like I put something here, right? So, oh crap, I missed the x. Right, it should say 2x squared. And let's say I realize that, so I'll type in exactly what I have. I type 2 squared minus 5x plus 4. So if I just go back over here and I'm like, oh, whoops, I just want there to be an x, right? I might not be, like if I just like put an x, it doesn't always work, right? Sometimes it clears things out depending on the type of calculator. So if you push second insert, so second delete, it will let you just type that x in without getting rid of other things, right? Sometimes it'll, like if I wanted to, let's say I wanted this to be 56, me typing a 6 there, it takes the x away. So then maybe I would want to push second insert x, and then I've got my x in there instead of having to retype everything. So that might be useful to you. So copying and pasting your last entry and the last answer and the last entry. So if let's say I did 2 plus 6 minus 5 plus 4 times 7, enter. And I wanted to re-pull that up because I wanted to change something about it. If I push second enter, it's going to pull that up. And then maybe I can go back and I'm like, oh, I meant for that to be a 3. Or I meant for that to be a minus. Right? So that might come in handy to you. Maybe I get the answer here, enter, and I want to say, okay, now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to do 32 to the power of that number. If I push second, this button right here, it's second answer is really what I'm doing. It's going to paste that number right there. Right? And then if I just push second answer, that's where that is, right? Or if I just build off of this and now push times, it's going to go there automatically. If I want to recall the thing that I entered, I push second entry. Oops. If I push second entry, right? So it's gonna just keep pushing things in there. 2 plus 2 plus 3. Right? Oh, look, it changed it back to that, right? So play around with that and see where you might use it. I use this a lot more with second answer rather than I do with second entry or second enter to get the last entry. This is a great one. So this is going to come in handy when you're working with crazy numbers, right? And maybe you want to recall that information later, right? Like second answer, this button just recalls the last thing. But maybe I'm solving some sort of information and I want to take that. So like my example over here was 2 pi, right? That's an irrational number. Maybe I want to recall that later. Okay. And I'm going to push STO for store. And let's say I want to save it as A. So I should push alpha A, enter. And now it's stored. So let's say later on I'm doing something and I'm like, oh, I want to recall that. I push alpha A, enter, and it's the answer that I had, right? So sometimes what might help you is if you're working with a crazy equation and you have like an A, a B, a C, a D, and you have all these different things, just entering them as A, B, C, and D and being able to recall them as opposed to writing these numbers. So this helps when you maybe don't want to round, right? Like if you round something and then you continue to calculate on a rounded number and you round again and then again, your answer, you develop more and more error. And so what this does is it helps to avoid some of that error because you wouldn't be rounding until the last step, that idea. So that is a very helpful one at any level. Like I wish I had That was something that was taught to me way earlier than Algebra 2, but that's one that I end up using a lot. Let's see, what else? Converting between a fraction and a decimal. This one might be familiar to you guys. So let's say I do something and I do 2 divided by 3. And I do that, right? It's not, the answer, 2/3 is not really 0.66666666667, right? My calculator's rounding it. My calculator just can't hold it. So it's rounding it on that last decimal. So if I push math, enter, enter, it's going to convert it back to a fraction. That's a great way to be able to tell if a number is rational or irrational. If your number is a nice decimal, like if you get something that's 0.5, fine, leave it as a decimal, do you. But if you get something like this, and it can be expressed as a ratio of 2 integers, if it can be written as a fraction, please write it as a fraction, right? I can express this entire number, whereas if I tried to write this, I'm rounding. So it is nice to deal with things in fractions. There is a way to change your calculator's mode to make it default into fractions. I'm not going to show that. I would love for you guys to explore that a little bit later and see if you can figure it out. You can also convert the other way if you really wanted. Like, let's say I wanted to get this back, and oh man, it's still a fraction. I could push math, decimal, enter, enter, and it will convert it back to a decimal. So just finding some of these buttons, I just want to show where they are. So E is one that we work with a lot. Let's say we just want to get A. You're going to push second. So any of these blue ones, and yours might be a different color, I'm going to push second first. Any of the green ones, those are the letters, I'm going to be pushing the green one, the one that says alpha. So if I push second divided by, that's E. Here, I'll write some of it. Second divided by ln, which you'll work with a lot. There's also this other E, where if you push second ln, but that one you need to be able to put, you have to put an exponent. So it's E to some power, and E is something you'll work with. ln is right here. Okay, and that's, you'll learn about that. Log is something we'll work with. That's right there. Root, if you push second squared, that's going to give you a square root. If you want another root, you're going to go ahead and push math. And if you want the cube root, there it is. If you want some other root, you push 5. Sorry, I have to put the number first. Let's say I want the 6th root. I'm going to push 6, math, and number 5. Right, and then it will be the 6th root. I'm trying to write with the back of the pen. That's why it wasn't working there for a moment. Oh. Right, so if you're going to find a root, you can either do second x squared, will get you square root. If you want another root, you're going to push the number and then math. And was it number 5? And then number 5. Yes. Pi is going to be second caret. Oops. Second caret. Second that button. Your x is right here. Right, so that's how you get the x. Right, so it's to the right of alpha. And trig, that's sine, cosine, tangent, that's these buttons. If you're ever working with inverse trig, you're going to go to second sine. I didn't add this on here, but let's say you wanted to find I. Oh, look, second I. Right, so your calculator can even work with I, which we will work with imaginary numbers when we come back together tomorrow. What else should I show? I don't know, just like play around with it. See what else it can do. There's so much, right? This is how you get to y equals if you're entering an equation. If you want the table, second table, right? This is, we worked with this a little bit yesterday. E, pi, the trig. I think that covers a lot of it. Okay. Graphing style. So I like this one a lot because you can see something happen. So let's say I've got 2 graphs in here. Let's say I've got 2x plus 4 and 2, let's say I have 2 to the power of x, and I'm going to compare them. This seems like something you did in Algebra 1. I could graph them, right? But maybe I want to change it around and I want them to graph a little bit different. I want to watch it happen. If I arrow over to this part on the left, you see how it's flashing, so that's this or this, I can change the style in which it's graphed. So if I push enter, you can see what the line changes to. Or it's, oh, it's shaded. Oh, it's shaded below. Oh, it has this. I'm a big fan of this one because you can see it being graphed, right? So if you're going to compare what gets to something fat first, that might be a nice way to see it, right? I use it a lot in pre-cal. So that's just a way to change the style, which helps when you're looking at two graphs. You can play around with like the different things they do. Dotted. Cool. Simultaneous, so maybe you're going to use this in at the same time. So I'm going to go to mode, and there's a lot of stuff that I would encourage you to play around with. Maybe you remember working with radians versus degrees. Your calculator defaults to radians. Oops. We work with this a lot in pre-cal, functions, parametrics, polars, and we work with, so we do this one a lot in pre-cal as well, right? You can even see, oh, I'm going to graph real and imaginary. There's a lot of stuff. I would play around with the mode and see like what these different things do to a graph. Would definitely do that. So sequential or simultaneous? So sequential is how it's graphing right now, right? I'm graphing the first one and the second one. Simultaneous, it's going to graph them at the same time. So I'm just going to highlight it and push enter. And then when I go ahead and I push graph, you can see they're going to graph at the same time. So you can kind of see what gets where first. Right, so if you're comparing two graphs of when do they intersect, you can see if they get there. This comes up a lot in pre-calculus when we look at when there becomes that like third factor of time. Right, so that might come up more there, but that's good to know how to do. And then I really liked this one. I don't really use this often, but I thought this was so cool. So instead of having to switch back and forth between the graph and the table, if I go back to mode and I go down here, there's the option, option for full, horizontal, or this is graph and table. So right now it's on full. The full screen is the graph. If I go to horizontal and I push graph, come on, please. Oh, I didn't actually change it today, guys. I have to go over and highlight it. Enter, and I push graph. I'll graph really slowly. And then I can like do math down here, right? Isn't that pretty cool? Like I can see the graph and still be doing math. That rhymes. I could also change this to the one that's all the way on the right, GT, which is graph and table. Push graph, and I'm looking at the graph with the table next to it, which I think is also awesome, right? Like maybe that's something that's helpful to you. You can say, right? So maybe it's helpful to see that. And you can play around with it and see the different things that it does. So that's really the last thing that I'm going to show you guys. There's a lot that this calculator does. I think this gives you an intro, maybe even more than an intro. This is probably more than you need combined with what we did yesterday. But what I want you to do now is kind of explore each one of these. Maybe if you want to go back to the video and watch a certain part or investigate a certain thing or see like when would you use that, which one would you use the most. So take some time and play around with it. There's not really any like practice per se. I did provide a worksheet that would require you to use the calculator. But I also think it's okay to just explore it. Your calculator does so much stuff, and the graphing calculator is what I want you to take some time to look at. So hopefully this was somewhat informative, and thanks everyone for watching.